Just to give you a bit of a background on the centre, so I'm Professor Gail McPherson. I might have said that at the start. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Director of the Centre for Culture, Sport and Events. We conduct a wide range of research around culture, the arts, sports, events, tourism, and we have a range of people that work with us either as research members of the centre or associate members or wider, and we're trying to grow our centre membership that's beyond just the core academic team but wider to policymakers as well. We have a steering group board of which Mary is a member of our board, which is fantastic and helps guide us. But this is some of the work that we do as part of the centre. Looking at a sort of local level with Renfrewshire Council, who are a key partner to us. We have worked with them from the bid for City of Culture. I was there as the Legacy and Culture Advisor, seconded to them, and we worked with them on an evaluation and monitoring strategy. And Sophie Mamata, who's here today, Tamsin Cox, and Katie's name's just escaped. Katie Nicholl, sorry, I'm having that brain drain. Katie Nicholl have worked tirelessly on creating that framework of evaluation for the cultural projects and the step changes that Paisley had wanted to achieve with the City Culture. And despite not winning the City of Culture status, we've committed to continuing the work in Renfrewshire Council in doing that, and us supporting them through the Research Centre. We have a range of PhD students that support that work and are committed and work with Renfrewshire Council. We've had 4 go through so far, and we've just appointed a 5th PhD student looking at cultural regeneration within the city. So that's a sort of local level. At national level, we've just recently, well, not recently, it's probably a year or 2 ago now, worked with Spirit of London 2012 on creating a project, a report on the social value of community events, where we looked like things at the Joe Cox Foundation and local trust funding and how community events transformed their communities in terms of well-being, inclusion, diversity, and that's what we're interested in this project too. Really is the impact that events can make in transforming communities. And within that, we created, again, another evaluation template for community groups to use free of charge. And that's online, all available for people to download, looking at 6 dimensions of social value. And you can tailor it to what you're interested in. On an international level, we've been involved, led by Professor David McGilvray, on the FestSpace project, which has looked at 5 different countries and looked at the role of festivals and events in public spaces. And again, using festivals and events to create cultural exchange, diversity, social and economic growth, but also the contested nature of events there, where it may lead to protest or conflict and disruption. And again, where the place of commercial events are in a public space versus a host community. So not shying away from some of these difficult issues. So that perhaps gives you some of the dimensions of the work that the centre does in festival events. Another large part of our work is in international sport events around parasport, where David McGilvray and I and others in the university have been working on the impact of mega sports events for people with disability since 2014. With colleagues in Canada, Laura Meisner and her team looking at how you leverage mega sports events to create social change. And in fact, at the latest Research Excellence Framework, commonly known in academia as REF 2021, what we call the academic Olympics, where you've got to get between 1-star and 4-star and grinds us all down at times, but gives you an indication of the impact of your work. And the impact case study that we led here on events as social change got 4-star. So we're particularly pleased that was an indication of the level and quality of our work on an international framework. We're particularly fortunate in Scotland to have such good partners in Glasgow Life, in Event Scotland, and for this project we've brought on Wynne Fanshawe as well to work with us to give a different perspective on social impact and well-being and change from this type of event, and whether we can demonstrate at a strategy level, from event strategy through to a practical level, a sort of mid-level for Glasgow Life, say through MELA and the World Cycling Championships, really what the impact that these events have on equality, diversity and inclusion, And we've got Saudi here today as well from Glasgow Mela, where we will then look on the ground at the actual events and piping live as well as to whether that strategy can really follow through and can events really be used to transform people's lives and in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion. So on that note, that gives you an idea of the types of things the Centre does, and I'm so pleased to welcome you in person for this panel discussion. And I'm going to hand over to Amy, who's going to tell you a bit more about this actual project. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Amy Finch, I'm Head of Policy and Impact at Spirit of 2012. We are a charitable trust set up after the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, with an endowment to spend on making sure events and volunteering could be a pathway to wellbeing for people in their communities. So we fund projects across the UK, and over the past 18 months in particular, we've been working on gathering up that learning into an inquiry report with a set of recommendations about how events can leave a longer term social impact for communities. And this funding round comes out of those recommendations. So I thought I'd zip you through the recommendations before I tell you a little bit more about the other projects that we're funding as part of this. The first is that long-term impact and a clear plan for what next must be the driver for the decision to bid or host a major event. The second, the long-term impact of events must be underpinned by demarcated funding, accountability and governance. Third, greater attention must be paid to who benefits from events and who is left out. Fourth, more events should be designed and curated with a broad range of stakeholders to build common ground across divides. And 5, events that use volunteers should have a clear strategy to boost longer term community volunteering. And for some reason, when I put this presentation together, I thought I'd highlight 2, purple and pink, which are the ones which are this funding round is particularly about. So thinking really about the inclusion of events and this exploiting events, being able to bring people together from across divides. And as part of the inquiry, we commissioned a piece by the think tank British Future called Seizing the Moment, which looked at this in a lot of detail. And I've put a quote there from British Future. They were looking at how events are not doing enough to move beyond the rhetoric of bringing people together and almost assuming that happens automatically. And how would we actually know if the events were bringing people together across generational, cultural, religious, socioeconomic divides? How would you know? And they talked a little bit about how we need this more inclusive story of a new us as part of that. And I guess in our findings overall in the report, there were 3 main things that stuck out in this topic. Firstly, at a practical level, events need to be able to maximise bridging contact. And we found in our research, so bridging between people from those many different backgrounds. And we found in the evidence we were taking that many community event organisers were experts in this. They knew the communities they were working in, they knew who was coming and who wasn't. Perhaps they were having some difficulties, depending on who they were, with the third one, the evaluation of that. They had a really strong sense of how to reach the people that they were looking for. The second thing that came up about the power of events in this space was the narrative power of bringing people together. And I would say this was particularly evident in those people we were speaking to at the major event level, the opening ceremonies and the power that a successful opening ceremony can can have in telling us a really inclusive story. It's certainly something that when people hear about our founding in London 2012, it's certainly where a lot of people's memories go to, how they could see themselves in the story that was being told in that opening ceremony. So how is the narrative around an event telling that kind of inclusive story? And then the third point, which came up again and again, was, okay, but how would we measure this? How would we know if we had actually brought people together? What does good look like at a very, very practical level? And again, we saw some indications of good practice here, but it felt like an area that we wanted to explore a lot more. So we put together a funding round in support of that recommendation called Moments to Connect. And we funded 7 projects, of which this is one as part of that. So in my remaining 5 minutes, I'm just going to take you through the other 6 projects so you can kind of see where it fits in. So the first is called Our Lives, Our Legacy. It's been run by an organisation called Springboard. Those of you, I'm sure you'll have seen in the news if you weren't aware of already. It's been the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement this year. So this project is working with young people across the year, taking last week as a starting point to think about what does the Good Friday Agreement mean to the next generation, and how can that continue? Is it still a way of bridging divides? Those kind of conversations 25 years on. The second project is taking place in County Durham. It's called The Year of the King. It's an intergenerational project run by Jack Drum Arts, and they are looking at how different generations will be brought together across this coronation year, starting with a parade next month. But they're particularly interested in an environmental angle and how King Charles's love of the environment is taken as the inspiration, but how young and old people rate highly the environment as a kind of passion cause. So over 60s and under 25s, it's kind of have the highest rates of environmental activism. So can this use be bridge divides in their community? This project, Songs of Inclusion, is being run by the Young Foundation, which is based in Toynbee Hall in East London, and they are looking at how different migrant communities and the music that they're interested in relates to the Eurovision Song Contest. So they're doing a co-produced project around the Eurovision Song Contest. The National Maritime Museum and the Caribbean Social Forum in Greenwich are doing a project around the 75th anniversary of Windrush. Neighbourly Lab are doing a project called Reimagining Volunteering. This is again based on the coronation, and they're looking at volunteering as a form of organising that brings people together from different backgrounds, and working out whether event volunteering can be the gateway into more long-term volunteering. And those of you that are following the big help out, which is happening on the 8th of May, will have seen some of the complexities around that and whether or not that's going to be a motivating factor for people to reverse the decline in volunteering that's been seen over recent years. And then the final project is another Windrush project being run by British Future, which is message testing different ways of reaching out to people who haven't previously been to a Windrush event. So it's going to produce practical advice for community organisers doing Windrush events in June about broadening their appeal to communities that have not previously engaged with that anniversary. British Future's belief is that the Windrush anniversary should be an annual national historical moment for the whole country. So we wanting to broaden the tent of people that are coming to it at the moment. So those are the other 6 projects that are taking part over the next 12 months as part of this Moments to Connect fund, and happy to take any more questions on those as the workshop moves on.
So yeah, great to be part of the projects that Amy's described, and I'm just going to take a few minutes, not much longer, to describe a little bit about the project that we're talking about today, which is called FestivalsConnect, which was our response to the call for Moments to Connect that came out. And there's a diversity of projects, I think, that are being funded as part of that. And so our project, again, the tagline, creating connected and cohesive communities through festivals and events. And I guess what Gail described earlier was that this is a challenging terrain, I think, because I think the idea that festival and events simply do create these kind of communities or cohesion, it doesn't happen by chance. It's got to be made to happen. There's to be investment, there's to be resources, there has to be a relationship between the strategic and the micro and the everyday. And even then, there may be short-term benefits, but perhaps we don't know enough about some of the longer-term benefits. So the way that we've tried to respond to this call is to reflect on that and to build a project that can hopefully help us get closer to some of the answers and some of those key questions. And just to start, just to talk a little bit about what I think we already know about festivals and events in terms of some of the contributions. So in the wider academic literature, you'll find out a lot about the role that festivals and events can play in strengthening social capital, and the networks and the reciprocity between groups and neighbourhoods. Amy talked a bit about the challenges of bridging, so moving beyond a bonding group, one group who get closer through festival events to reach out to other groups. So we're going to get you to talk about that later in some of the discussions about how festival events might be able to contribute to go beyond an existing group, a closed group, and open that up, because I think that's some of the key challenges. We hear a lot about the value especially in a kind of political environment where we're concerned about social cohesion, about what role festivals and events might play in actually being able to bring communities together and cohere. And again, there are examples of people in the room. The picture on the right-hand side is from Govan Hill International Carnival and Festival, and Jude's here today, which is, I guess, a very diverse area in the south side of the city we've done some research with in the past. And again, there's lots of challenges in that environment, but that event is very place-based, very much about trying to ensure that people of different nationalities, different language, are able to celebrate something collectively and demonstrate and showcase that activity. We know that encounter, I think Amy mentioned that as well, that encounter is an important element if we're going to get anywhere close to something called cohesion or greater social capital. People need to be encountering each other in spaces where there's safe spaces, for example. And again, carnivals are events that actually see people visibly out in spaces, in public spaces, in shared spaces, is an important feature of that, and we kind of know that from previous projects that we've also worked with. And so producing that kind of pleasurable experiences through festival events, because in some respects that's one of the major qualities of these activities, is that people enjoy being there, enjoy being in those spaces, feel relaxed, and that's really important to create. So we believe that festival events play a really important role, but we need to understand a little bit more about how all that works in terms of some of the hypothetical change that might be in place, where if one chain breaks down, then you don't get the benefits that you might get. And that's where some of the work that we've done on our FestSpace project, which was preceded this project, kind of perhaps looked to say that there's a lot of kind of rhetoric around about some of the need for strategy to be delivered into practice, but actually some of those tangible actions are not necessarily present or available. And we're dealing with complex environments. Central state, local state, festivals and events that are funded or not funded through that. There's a whole portfolio of activities there which adds complexity. So we want to, I guess, explore that outcomes that can't just be expected or presumed, but actually we need to try and understand how they can be demonstrated empirically. And that's what our project tries to do. And just the research questions that we've posed for this project, as you'll see at the top, we're very keen to look at the kind of macro, meso and micro level. Gail described that earlier, so that we can actually understand what's happening at national level, policy making, strategy, how that's been implemented, funding, and how that drives activities, encourages certain types of activity, and potentially discourages others. Meso level, looking in our case in the situation in Glasgow. So we've sort of chosen to say, well, we want to make that concrete, look at the situation in Glasgow, and then look at micro level festivals, events and communities that are seeking to benefit, so that we actually have that translation between the three. So that describes our kind of approach that we've set out and that we will be seeking to operationalise in the next year and a bit. So national policy environment, we've got people from Events Scotland and others here. There's a review of Events Scotland strategy, which Mary will talk about soon in terms of the macro level, and that's kind of interesting. What are the drivers, what are the changes, what are the trends there in terms of how government might be supporting an event strategy for Scotland. Glasgow also, I think, going through a kind of revision of its strategy for events post-COVID, thinking about what's changed there, maybe the importance of bringing people together again, and obviously I mentioned the specific communities and events that we're looking at, and we're focusing our attention. It's always a difficult thing as a researcher to focus, well, what we're going to look at. It has to be specific, has to be clear. So looking at Glasgow Mellow, we'll hear from Sodhi soon. You see Ice Cycling World Championships, one of these big sport events that's clearly being activated across communities in this city. It's going to be a very, very big event in August. And again, looking at what's in place there, how are communities seeking to benefit or being encouraged to benefit from that large event coming, and Piping Live. So we're working with Glasgow Life on these events too. And one of the key things that we proposed to this project was to do this over time. So we're going to be doing work with communities and events pre, those events taking place during, which is when lots of event research takes place at that moment, but I think most importantly afterwards, so that we can actually identify some target areas and communities and events and actually understand a little bit more about, okay, so we had a high when the event was here. Everyone seemed to be enjoying it, it was pleasurable, great. What have been some of those lasting legacies, if you want to use that term, which has often been discredited, and you know, what has changed potentially within that, and what made those changes happen, that idea of making something happen rather than expecting it to happen afterwards. And again, we are looking to use a wide variety of methods to try and explore these kind of issues, and some of those were, you know, having a launch event where we're also getting you guys to participate in it is one of the kind of key features. We want to be open to quite creative methods. That last one about using co-creation workshops where we get the right actors and stakeholders together once we have clear findings to actually think about how we can enact some of these, how we can own some of these and deliver some of these into the way we think about events being organised and delivered is really important. And something that we've done in many of the projects that we do is try to be quite creative in the dissemination and the way in which we create artifacts from those. So Gail talked about our literature review and also some of the tools that we developed for our social value of community events. There's some handbooks over there if you're interested in research and festivals, where we produced this handbook of methods for research, and it tries to advise people how they might go about using some creative methods for research and festivals and events. And obviously we'll do a lot on our social media and website to promote the outcomes that are coming out from this project too. And this is a part of it too in terms of what we're doing here today. So I'm going to leave it at that now, and what we're going to do for the next section is actually hear from some of the events that I've mentioned up here. Sando, my colleague, is going to host a little panel, so if Sando wants to come up, we're just going to have a panel specifically looking to discuss that issue about the contribution that festivals and events can make to equality, diversity and inclusion outcomes. And so Sando will take over and discuss that, and then once we've had the panel session, we're going to move into a discursive session where we get you to feed in your ideas to some of the questions that we've also posed for us next.
So obviously you all had a task to prepare. Mm-hmm. So we have 5 minutes, 5 minutes, only 5 minutes to discuss and give the answer that actually David was very smart, because he have a whole research question and then he comes and asks you to answer that. How easy was that? Huh? Co-creation, yeah, that's what the people say. So obviously the question was, what contribution you guys feel in terms of the festivals and events can make to equality, diversity, and inclusion outcomes? So I would like to start with Craig, if that's okay.
Thank you, and hello everybody. Apologies I was late. I've missed lunch and I've obviously missed the full fat Coke that was on offer as well, so apologies for that. Yeah, I mean, I think I did a bit of preparation for this, but actually just listening to our two speakers, I'm going to ad-lib a bit, because I do think that it's important just to look actually beyond EDI, because actually what the role of major events can play in this country. And as we know, historically it's been very much around economic impact and eyeballs on Scotland. That's been really the funding model, and we have definitely seen a shift around that social impact. So it's probably fairly significant that this is certainly the first event that I'm aware of. I just so you know, I used to be the Chief Executive of Scottish Cycling, you know, a massive advocate of what cycling can do for the country. Cycling is fairly fragmented because it cuts across so many portfolios. And part of the vision for bringing the Cycling World Championships to Scotland, and part of the business case, was about driving a broader national policy agenda for cycling, but could also inform that major events debate as well. Hence, I jumped ship, and a post was created at a director level within the event, which I don't think we've seen that before. Quite often, evaluation and even social impact, it can sometimes even sit under a comms department, so it can be way below in terms of that executive level. So I was recruited and appointed really because I believed in it, and I actually, you know, there's a lot of critics out there, what have major events ever done for legacy, and I wanted to actually really show and make an impact. And a lot of your work, Amy, is, I mean, it does ring a lot of truth. So our headline objective for the event is about inspiring more people to ride a bike and be a catalyst for change. And that catalyst for change is at that national policy level around cycling, but also how can that support at a local level. So what we're seeing is things like a national cycling participation strategy being developed. Scotland, despite the multi-millions of pounds that goes into cycling, there's no joined up approach from national government. And that's not a criticism, but it's actually, cycling's almost a victim of its own success. It doesn't sit neatly in any one policy portfolio of government. So what we've been able to do is almost, I call myself the neutral broker. You know, I speak to lots of ministers, I speak to lots of senior civil servants, and I speak to a lot of chief execs and boards and heads of public agencies who invest in cycling and say, can we actually work together a bit more? And again, that replicates itself at that local level as well. So I believe that major events can play a role. We've seen organisations like SOSE in the south of Scotland develop a 10-year cycling strategy. Undoubtedly, the event has been a catalyst to make that happen. That's about positioning them to promote cycling, but also to maximise things like levelling up, growth money, and other transport money that's there. In terms of getting back to the agenda here today, EDI, we've put EDI at the centre of, I guess our values and what we believe in. So we've got a framework that's published, so have a look on our website. We've produced a framework for EDI, and we've also produced a pledge. So we've got all our funding partners, including the Scottish Government, UK Sport, Glasgow, and the actual event delivery partners, because it's a decentralised model, all to sign up to this pledge. So we're very much looking at it from a point of view of the athletes. Our target was to attract 120 countries. I think the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow had about 70 odd countries. So that was our target. We're looking hopefully of delivering at least 180 countries. So actually that in itself, and that intervention's been through what the UCI have been doing to support the smaller nations, but also what the event's trying to do in terms of attracting a field from all over the world. So there's an athlete focus on inclusion, but also from a participation point of view, and I guess a spectator point of view. We're expecting over 1 million spectators. The good news is that the small percentage of that is paid spectators, because we've got things like road races, we've got mountain bike marathons, we've got free-to-view events. We're going to reach over 1 billion people in terms of TV audience worldwide. We want to promote cycling in all its facets. It's not just about, you know, elite cyclists coming to Glasgow and Scotland. It's about the power of the bike and what the bike can do for society from an inclusion, from a net zero perspective, from a point of view of the cost of living crisis, you know, what the power of the bike can do to help people and to help communities. So we've got tickets for sale at £5 for concessions and children, for example. That's affordable in my book. But also we've so far secured approximately £12 million of new legacy money. So we've seen a capital fund to be created. It's called the Cycling Facilities Fund, and we've also we encouraged and persuaded colleagues such as Event Scotland and Sport Scotland to create a community cycling fund. And what that's doing is putting in from Sport Scotland 3-year revenue investment into every local authority in Scotland to drive new cycling programmes. And the focus of that is about new audiences, it's about children and young people, and it's about hard to reach groups, What we've got to do is get those organisations to really evidence-base the social impact of that over that period. Because I sit in OC, I'm out of a job at the end of this year, the company will close down and we'll go away. So it's about the public partners, and where we're trying to put a lot of the legacy projects is to embed it in organisations that are going to be there beyond the event. So there's some examples. We're also trying to attract commercial sponsorship and drive new investment into cycling as a result of this event. The £8 million, which is part of the 12 I mentioned, of the capital fund, we envisage and we estimate that's going to attract over £30 million worth of new investment in grassroots cycle sport facilities, not flashy velodromes, not big shiny facilities, things like pump tracks in local communities, pump tracks that are going to be there for decades. And a lot of those pump tracks are going into hard to reach communities. That's where we're putting them. They're free to access, and it's about how you actually measure the impact of that over the longer term. Look, I could talk to you for an hour. I'm really passionate, I'm really excited about this, happy to pick up, but I'll leave it at that because I'm sure there's questions, and I'll pass over to, I don't know who's next.
Thank you so much, Craig. Tickets are on sale, so £5. Don't forget that.
Concessions.
Mari.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess I'd start off by saying that our national event strategy aims to deliver benefits to all of Scotland's diverse communities. And in terms of our funding programmes in general, all applicants are required to evidence how they will engage communities, how they will ensure there's great access and inclusivity, and all those kind of key aspects are assessed. I'd also say, if you're not aware, that we are currently reviewing the strategy. It was launched in 2015 and it's well due for a review. So if you're not already engaged with that, please have a look at LinkedIn or Event Scotland's page and get involved. My colleague Torquil is sitting right here. Put your hand up, Torquil. Grab him. There's some workshops that are happening across the next couple of weeks, and the consultation runs until the end of June. So please get involved. And really in that, I expect that these aspects around diversity, inclusion, equality, etc., will really come to the fore, as will other aspects in terms of sustainability and well-being, in terms of those really being priority aspects of our national strategy, and the look for ensuring that the events and festivals that we support, certainly through public funding, can deliver on some of those key government priorities. So I can't predict what that strategy is going to tell us, the refreshed version of that, but I will. I think these things are going to be much more important, and it will, our form and what we do will certainly follow strategy. So it's going to be a really interesting time to see where that takes us, and that will be launched towards the end of this year. But today I was just going to pick a couple of major events, programmes and projects that I've led on over the past couple of years to highlight how we are already putting diversity and inclusion at the absolute heart of our strategy in developing and delivering these projects. So some of you might be aware of the themed years programmes of activity. Our last themed year was delivered last year. It was our year of stories, and we put themed years are brought together by a whole range of organisations. They're big partnership collaborative projects, and what was really clear from the first discussion was this has to be all about diverse voices, inclusion and accessibility, and really spreading the benefit and reach of the year across the country. So for me, it presented a really huge opportunity to engage communities in a way that we hadn't really been able to do before. So out of my 700k events budget, events are an absolutely core part of themed years, if you're not aware. There's a big industry engagement programme, big marketing communications programme, but events are sort of the engine at the centre that brings it all together. So I carved out 100k from my event budget, but the brilliant thing is, through really fantastic partnerships with Museums Galleries Scotland, National Lottery Heritage Fund and Scottish Government, we raised that in a really short period of time to just under 1 million to support this community programme specifically. So it was a new element, a new strand, if you like, of the themed years approach, and it was just fantastic, hugely successful. we had about 400 applications, and through the increased funding that we were able to attract sort of midway through, we were able to support just under half of those applications. So about 180 organisations all across the country were supported with small funds up to £5,000, and they delivered between them over 1,000 events all across Scotland, attracting just under 1 million attendances across the year. And about 100 or so of those grantees also commissioned new work and generated about 5,000 opportunities for artists to showcase their work. So, this is all coming out of COVID. So the fact that we just got such great engagement was absolutely fantastic. But absolutely critical to putting diversity and inclusion and identifying how we could engage with communities through the Year of Stories more was to ensure that those diverse voices could really be brought to the fore and included in the year and really provide that really rich programme. So there were so many groups. The report will be released next month, so please have a look. It makes brilliant reading. There's loads of great case studies in there. But groups LGBTQ+, refugees, minority ethnic groups, disabled groups, all sorts of groups really engaged with the year, and there's just some beautiful stories in terms of what they were able to achieve with relatively small amounts of funding. And the research, we commissioned some independent research from Wave Hill, funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, and it really evidenced how, as you would hope, these events really brought communities together, showcased talents and the voices of many underrepresented groups, expanded the grantees' reach and diversified their audiences, raised the profile of those organisations, supported grantees to strengthen existing or develop new collaborations or partners, which is really key and which is a sort of central thing from the theme year approach, is introducing new partners to make new work happen out with the context of that particular themed year. It opened up new areas of work and new routes for funding and support, which is key. And alongside the grant funding programme, we thought we just can't do that. We've got to create some more support around this. So we developed a sort of wraparound programme where there was some skills development opportunities, a marketing programme and hands-on marketing support for all the grantees should they wish to access that. So it was really about trying to upskill communities as well as support them and engage them in the work. So overall, the programme helped bring people together. It highlighted our diverse voices in all their forms. It was a programme for everyone in Scotland. I think someone mentioned, what's the new us? We were really clear that we wanted to represent all voices that wanted to be part of this. And it created multiple benefits, including contributing to community wellbeing. As I say, it developed skills, and I think really contributed to creating thriving, resilient communities, all part of Scottish Government priorities and agendas. So we were really super proud of the programme. As I say, it was delivered in a very short period of time, but we made a choice there as a public agency delivering a large event programme to put diversity and inclusion at the very heart. We had great partners that came on in a very short period of time to make that happen and make a difference. And as I say, when it's released, do have a look at that report. It makes for some really inspiring reading in terms of what some communities delivered. The other major event that I'd like to highlight in a similar but different space is Dandelion, which was Scotland's contribution to Unboxed, which is a celebration of creativity across the UK. And our role was to commission Scotland's contribution to Unboxed, which was funded by the Scottish Government. And given the commission was worth about £7 million, so this was all launched in 2020 when this opportunity became live. That was mid-COVID with lots of people, not having any work at that point. It was an absolutely key opportunity. And from my perspective, I was really clear that we had to spread the benefit of that opportunity as broadly as possible and really ensure we could engage across communities in Scotland. So that's what we did. So Dandelion, which was our commission, was a major creative programme which encouraged people to sow, grow and share food, music, ideas and so much more. It presented over 500 events in partnerships with established arts organisations and community groups, so not just landing in and their intent was to work with those that were already there. And really, it was a massive celebration of people and planet aiming to inspire positive change. As part of the programme, 12 unexpected gardens were created across Scotland for, in derelict spaces and places in alignment with these arts and community groups. And the focus there was investment and focus on local people and really getting that genuine engagement. There were more than 1,000 paid jobs that were created, and skills development was absolutely central to the approach, from the creation of emerging creative producers as part of the Unexpected Gardens approach that we had, so people getting into the industry, to working with the Scottish Rural University College and working with their cohort of horticulture students who would bring to life many of the events that were delivered in the big plant giveaways and things like that, which was absolutely fantastic. We also had a massive schools programme with around about 450 schools and just under 90,000 students taking part in a learning programme across the growing season in 2012. So there was just so many aspects to this project that provided really fantastic opportunities for engagement and working with existing organisations to help them, move forward with their own existing strategies and intentions. KPMG were
1 minute, Mary, so you don't run too long.
KPMG were commissioned by Unbox to undertake an evaluation, and there was just, this was quite some of you may know, quite a contentious project overall, but I would say that the results speak for themselves in the evaluation in terms of, generating that connection to other people, just creating positive opportunities for people to share an experience, to feel more connected to the local area. Anyway, you can have a look at the report, it's online. Some really fantastic outcomes in this space that we're talking about today. So I guess just to sum up, that's just two examples where, as a public sector agency, we made a decision to put these values at the absolute core of what we did. And I think, nothing's perfect, but we made some really good inroads and had some really great results working in partnership with organisations across the country. That's it.
Excellent. Sorry.
Yeah, I won't be as long as that.
Oh, you were just as long.
The Glasgow Mela, if anyone doesn't really know, we've just been recruited as producers for the Mela from 2019 onwards, and we've been given an opportunity really to sort of take it to another level. And again, all the stuff that's been discussed earlier is what we've taken on board, to move forward with the Mela. And for anyone that doesn't know, the Mela is an annual event, a multicultural festival that's been taking place in Glasgow for over 30 years. It celebrates the city's diversity and the contribution made by the South Asian community. So basically the Mela was established when Glasgow got the City of Culture status back in 88-90 or something.
1990, yeah.
Was it 1990? Aye. So, and a lot of money was sort of provided to minorities at the time, to give them a voice. And that's where the Mela and many other organisations were established. And thankfully, the Mela is one organisation that's still running strong. So 30 odd years it's been in place in Glasgow. And basically, people from different backgrounds come together, celebrate each other's cultures. In that one-day event. For us, as a minority, the South Asian diaspora, the Mela is an essential platform for promoting EDI. It offers an opportunity for communities to come together, learn about each other. We were talking about bridging gaps, inclusion. So this is our opportunity, as a whole, to put that into place and share experiences. Through events, performances, the Mela provides space for dialogue, exchange, breaking down barriers and promoting a sense of unity amongst communities. One of the ways that Glasgow Mela addresses issues within the South Asian diaspora is through performance. So if anyone's ever attended the event, performance is one of the main sort of viewpoints that you have when you go there and you experience. And being the sort of first Scottish-born producers for the Mela, and we sort of call ourselves like this hybrid culture, where we are sort of educated in Scotland, but we have origins coming from South Asia. The perspective that we brought on board for performance really is not to have a performance, but to talk beyond the performance. So you're not just witnessing, something that's happening on stage, enjoying a good day. We want to start a conversation why these performances are relevant to us through performance. Last year we had a Gaelic performance that basically talked about climate change, and again this year the programming that we have is very nuanced to deal with issues that we have within our own diaspora, the diversity with our own South Asian diaspora, as well as the overall picture in Scotland. So performance basically is our tool as producers for social change. That's what we use. And it's there to address and raise awareness about issues that are basically often swept under the carpet, I would say, especially within with our own Asian, South Asian diaspora. The Mela usually features performances from a range of artists from the South Asian community and beyond. So, me being a musician myself, I've spent 30 years performing here in Scotland, done loads of collaborative work, have been involved in some wonderful sort of opportunities funded by Creative Scotland, and so you sort of know, I sort of know personally how to sort of get cultures put together, if you know what I mean, so as a producer, when you're working with one genre to another, it's in a very subtle way another sort of method of bridging that gap and creating understanding of each other's culture, and that's how we sort of contribute, towards the whole sort of cultural landscape, of Scotland. Again, one of the examples we had was we have a discipline called Gaelic within our art form. It's an ancient form of storytelling that's originated from North India, and the Gaelic dance that was performed at the Mela last year basically addressed an issue of cultural identity within South Asian diaspora, and it highlighted the struggle of a young South Asian person growing up in the West, trying to balance their cultural heritage within their modern identity. So, these are the kind of issues that we try to bring on stage. Also within, that platform that we've been given, workshops have now been put into place. We are trying to expand on this one event and trying to sort of have a bit of longevity and a bit more of a spread on this type of conversation. Again, with the economic impact, social impact, cultural impact, all these things are sort of taken into consideration to further the conversation, to try and create that sort of diverse landscape that we're all trying to achieve here today. And for us, the Glasgow Mela plays a significant role in promoting EDI. It addresses issues within the diaspora, and really, since we've been producers, we can proudly say that 95% of the artists that we put on stage are from Scotland. So Asian artists, as far as Stornoway, we've tapped into the Western Isles and researched, looked out for folk as far and wide as we possibly could within Scotland specifically, because it's our Mela. When the Mela was established in 1990, I was a young lad then, and I do know that it was established with a little bit of difficulty, a lot of meetings, a lot of convincing, but it's here, and again, it's our voice, and it's basically the stage that we have to try and amalgamate, within that bigger community, and raising awareness, talking about important issues, and trying to sort of amalgamate the whole society in such a way that it's that everybody's sort of talking off the same page and has an understanding of each other's sort of cultural backgrounds.
Thank you so much, Salim. Thank
that
you
5
so
minutes?
much. That was 5 minutes. Can I ask you to put your hands together for these amazing examples? Thank you so much. I'll open up the floor for questions. I would like just to kind of sum up a little bit that it's clear from all your points that Scotland is the perfect stage, is it not?
Yeah.
It is the perfect stage for events. And it just shows the care for communities, the care for minorities, the care for the well-being of people, for diversity, for inclusion, for equality. And I think points in terms of, I think you mentioned, to be a catalyst for change, and how actually Scotland has been doing that, actually, to use events to become catalysts for change at local level, at council level, at national level, always trying to use events to be catalysts for positive change. It's great to see some overarching themes in terms of grassroots groups and getting them involved in the transformation process, involved with communities. It was interesting, I think you mentioned the year of stories, but it was interesting that when I was looking at my phone, it's like 2018 was the year of young people, and young people and the voice of young people have been a minority as well, have been excluded for many, many years from the mainstream narratives, and having that year was really inspirational, us looking to them as catalysts for change as well. The importance of partnerships and the use of events to upskilling, to bring people together, to learn from each other, to develop this cultural awareness that actually you mentioned in terms of when you bring people together and develop that important cultural awareness that we have and bridging the gap. Excellent. So I would like to open up now for you all. Anyone wants to ask questions? So we'll start with Jane here.
Hi, thank you everybody for an interesting...
Just tell you who you are, just so I'm Jane from...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just so people know you.
I'm Jane, I'm a professor in festival and event management at Edinburgh Napier. So I thought it was really interesting what you were discussing, and I suppose my question is around... So obviously mega events have been heavily criticised in terms of that they really don't bring that legacy and they don't bring the economic impact that they say they will, and also this idea of parachuting in and out of destinations leaving little imprint. And so I suppose what Mary was talking about in terms of particularly the community fund with Year of Stories, and also I think it was really interesting what you're talking about Unbound, because Unbox was really heavily criticised because it didn't deliver on all its objectives. But I think in Scotland it did, because you took a very different approach. You know, I think it was criticised because a lot of them were vanity projects, they didn't engage local audiences. So my question is it better to invest lots of money in bringing huge mega events to a destination that have that sort of wow factor and maybe, bring the prestige? Or is a better approach to look at, those sort of quick wins in terms of investing in lots and lots of little grassroots projects?
So, do you want anyone specifically to address that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's both. Certainly, in terms of the national strategy, it's all about having a portfolio approach from local community events right the way up to mega events. So I think it's important to have a strategy. That's the key thing. And I think that's why it's so important that we're undertaking this work and we'll get a refreshed one that will help us keep moving everything forward. But I think you need both. But it's the connection between, all the activity, and that's why we've got some great engaged local authorities across Scotland who are really switched on to events. Some are less so, but I think with a joined up collaborative approach, which we're always striving to take and maintain, both are required and more to really create the perfect stage in Scotland.
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. It's both. It's not an either or. And I think from a sporting perspective, that if we didn't have role models, for people to look up to and to dream. And also from an integration, we're integrating paracycling across the championships, first time it's been done as well. This is about showcasing the diversity of the sport across 13 world championships. It's reaching, a worldwide audience into Chinese markets. As I said, we've got something like 260 outlets in terms of broadcast outlets. It's going to be going out live. Most of the competition is going out live through BBC in the UK. It's about celebrating what Scotland has to offer. It's about putting Scotland on the world stage, that hopefully people will come back, people will invest in Scotland. So without that mega event, we would lose a lot of that. But the local side of it is so important, because it's about connecting that major event to local people so they feel part of it, whether that's through like the Go Live programme, and you'll see in Glasgow, who I didn't speak about, but Glasgow are putting a huge commitment into pushing Go Live into all wards across the city in the lead up to the championships. And again, it's about taking the event to local people. So I think it's both. We've got to, we can't just give them a showcase and nothing for it. And I think for me, that's where the big benefit is about using it as a platform, using it as a leverage, and particularly when you can bring a capital legacy that's not just the circus comes to town and goes, it's there for a long time. And I do believe that the cycling world champs, and again, something that I didn't say is that, evaluation budget is very, very small. And it's about how do we actually work with others to make sure that we can evaluate this properly. Because it's not just about 2023, it's about what's the impact over the next decade from this event, and who's going to do that. There's a big question there.
More questions?
Hi, Tim Smith, Impact Consultant for Sport Major Events, and here as a incoming Board Director of Spirit in 2012. To all of you, particularly Solly and Craig, is what's the biggest barrier you have faced and are facing around using your events to bring people together, to promote community cohesion and connectedness?
Good. So the biggest barrier?
Biggest barriers that you're facing. Be honest. But you are on camera.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if honesty would work here, but personally, I've actually found, the organisations, I'm not going to name any, but the organisations that we've worked with our vision as to where we want to take, this is a one-off event, it's a local event type thing, but we want to take it, we just had this discussion, again, everybody has to work together across the board, to achieve what we're trying to do, and again, I agree with Craig that it has to be a long-term plan, right, and you're wanting to sort of leave a legacy there, for people to work from, so it's making people understand really what diversity is from both sides. How I look at diversity, how somebody in Scotland would look at it. A person from a different culture in Scotland would look at diversity are two different things. And it's to find the common ground and really understand, where we all come together. Scotland for us is our home, right? So for us, me personally, I want to put Scotland on the map, from an Asian music scene point of view. That means a huge deal to me, and the Mela has given me a platform to try and do that. But again, it's to try and find the common ground, which I found the biggest barrier. And making, again, having that discussion and getting organisations to come together and say, okay, where do we really stem from? And then work from that onwards. That's what I felt has been the biggest barrier. Great.
I would say three things, Tim. Resource, pace, and commitment. When I mean resource, coming through COVID, a lot of the agencies we were working with have been in survival mode. They've been trying to, keep their sectors surviving, whether that's hospitality and tourism, whether it's sports sector. So the reliance on, our legacy from Cycling Worlds is definitely been impacted by that, which again comes back to pace. So resource and pace are linked there. And I think commitment for me, I think particularly the way the public sector is funded, a lot of agencies, including Events Scotland, receive an annual award, so it's very hard for them to make commitments beyond 1 year. Sports Scotland have got slightly more flexibility because of lottery funding, but I think it's really hard for communities as well to develop projects that aren't, here one day and gone the next. And I think that longer term commitment piece for me is really challenging. Hence one of the reasons why I was very adamant around that capital investment, because I think the spin-offs of that is much more sustainable than revenue. So I think the capability of the public sector over the last 18 months has been a challenge. I think we're coming out of that. But everywhere I go, what I hear is that everybody's too busy and they don't have the time to do other things. And that's a big frustration. That's me being absolutely honest.
Can I mention anything, Marie? Anyone else?
I'm a field holder at the Edinburgh University as well. So thanks for sharing all the great projects, and even for David and Dave for expressing what are some of the projects happening now. So I'm from the Caribbean originally, but my entire academic career was mostly in Australia. So right now we're dealing with Brisbane Olympics. So there's a lot of similar conversations that were happening around diversity and stuff. But I firstly would like to sort of express my gratitude to see that there's actual inclusion and diversity in the conversations and the examples, even having a live case study here. Because I think we all need to be careful, both in industry as well as in academia, not to what we would call work washing or black cladding, where it's like sustainability, this is a new thing, but actually have examples. And I just want to drill down a bit more. I know there's reports where we can read, but are there any other elements around what are probably some of the KPIs or measurements of actual impacts on that social cohesion parameter that would probably be deemed a success in your regards beyond the economic aspect, even it could be socio-economic, that we could probably dig into, because I feel sometimes we hear the words, but just get one or two live examples or actual impact. That would be great if anyone could share on the platform.
I think that report that will be released next month is a really good place to look for that, because it really digs in a way that I can't do in this kind of format today. It just provides those case studies of all sorts of underrepresented groups, or groups, from, like I say, the most diverse voices across Scotland, how they engaged and what they got out of it individually, but also the report breaks down just all of the impacts. And it's things like increased profile for those organisations, those making those new connections. So there's very specific outcomes for that particular programme to individual organisations, but there's great overarching, as I sort of explained when I was giving my overlong intro. There's some generic things that the majority of grantees got from that. But for me, with that project in particular, it was just a really great opportunity to make sure, because we had 2 rounds actually, and we wanted to make sure that we had the broadest range of groups and voices, organisations represented in that programme. So we were able to adjust in round 2 if we felt that we didn't have enough from a particular community. We could see in round 1 that we hadn't maybe reached out to this particular section of society. We were able to use our partners to make sure that opportunity was getting out there. So it was a really, really good way to try and get that balance and really encourage a whole range of groups to get involved.
So let me ask you, following that question, like you represent multiple types of communities. When you're talking about Southeast Asia, it's not something that a lot of people think that's one thing, but it's not. It's like very different. And you mentioned the example of North India. So how do you deal with that potential fragmentation of communities inside the group? If that makes sense. So
no, absolutely. I mean, when we got the job for the BELA, we sort of realised that a lot of the programming that had taken place was very North Indian. So first of all, we wanted to sort of break that down, because within a minority we also have another minority, we've got other minorities within a minority. So a lot of folk are coming to Scotland, migrating here from different parts of let's say, South Asia, South India, for example. So what we do is we incorporate their performances. Like last year, I commissioned a piece where language was the forefront of the whole thing. So Tamil, Kannada, Bengali, all these languages that don't really get represented and showcased at this event, was part of the forefront of the programming. Also, I mean, when we started the Mela, we had the first ever sort of LGBTQ+ presenter. That's never been done. Dark skin is also an issue. Caste is an issue within our diaspora. So these are the type of, purposeful programming, with the subtle messages that we put in to, like, all the Melas that we've produced and programmed. And so for that particular scenario, we do bring in artists from different parts of South Asia and give them a platform. So every community, I mean, we try our best with the resources we have, right, to represent every community that we, have access to.
Questions?
Can I just?
Yeah, sorry.
Because I just wanted to see as well, based on that, because social cohesion is for community, do you find that also shifts within the community? Because, I mean, even with now recently there's a lot of refugees, and, inclusions, everything from females to different able people. Do you find people appreciate more these different sects based on visiting an event like that or being part of the organizing? Does it filter through, or is it just on that sort of organizational level?
I mean, again, Glasgow Life is the organisation that sort of runs the Mela, so we have all these discussions with them. But the artists who we have a conversation with really do appreciate it. Because the programming isn't really in your face, it's subtle, it's there, so like this year there's an artist who's disabled, he's wheelchair bound, but he's a hip hop artist. So I think this is the first time we're going to be challenging accessibility. We're going to be challenging a lot of different things, with that one act in the Mela this year. I mean, some things are visible, some things aren't. That's the only thing. But again, within the sort of programming, and hopefully, I mean, as I was discussing earlier, trying to get a bit more conversation and working beyond performance. Because right now, the way the Mela stands, you go there, you have a great time. Happens on a Sunday, you forget about it on a Monday. It's as simple as that. But we are trying to extend that, have conversations, get people to understand exactly, what this diaspora is. And I think with that, you're going to have a lot more, of inclusion, coming from discussions of such.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, one of the things we did right from the outset is we tendered out for basically an expert resource to help us, because I think when you have it in-house as well, so we brought an element of independence and expertise. So Anila McKellar, some people might know Anila, more diversity. She actually is from my minority ethnic group herself. But again, what we did is also, through the framework development, we didn't come up with a document and then go and ask people to give us a view on it. We involved, a whole range of diverse groups. So, it was over 30 organisations involved in the development of that from all parts of the country as well. And again, in terms of the consultation of what that document looks like, things like accessibility audits, we've used Ewan's Guide, they're doing a piece of work. So actually people who have, experts groups with disabilities are actually looking at the venues and telling us what the challenges are, rather than some white middle-aged man trying to come up with all the answers, So I think it's about giving yourself credibility, but also bringing in that expertise. We've set ourselves targets in our volunteer recruitment, for example, around, ethnic minority groups, the number of people from Scotland, male, female, etc. All our activation programmes will be collecting, where possible, postcodes, so we can link that back to SIMD areas, and again, male, female, children, young people, etc. So it's hard to set too many KPIs in advance, but what we want to do is to tell a story and actually measure the right things, so we can tell the story and actually have the evidence after the event. It's probably a bit early for us to have too many KPIs just yet.
We have time for one last question. So,
hi, yes, I'm Bill Morris. I'm another board member for Spirit of 2012. It's great to be here. This is such an important project. Thank you. I was reflecting on the earlier question about whether there's a better chance of success with small community events than with the mega events. And I do that because over many years I've worked on events right from the very smallest community events up to the very biggest and many Olympic Games, things like that. And actually I think I conclude that scale isn't really the issue. It's much more about the mindset. Have you got a long-term vision above and beyond the event? Do you then establish a governance structure that supports it? Is there a funding stream to do it? And the means to deliver? And I think that applies just the same for small events and big. And actually they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So the community events are, as we've said, much closer and have the opportunities that come with being very close to communities and spot things on the ground. But the mega events have resources, profile, media, etc. So one of the things that occurs to me increasingly is that the chemistry, the ecosystem, when you can put the two together, a bit like you were saying, Craig, when you can build a high-profile mega event, but you genuinely have grassroots locked into it, interesting things start to happen then. They don't always work. We've seen quoted some that don't, but the ones that do, where that chemistry applies, it is immensely hard.
Excellent.
So my name's Jude, I work for Governor Baths, I report to the Governor International Festival. And kind of what you're saying, I don't know if there's a blueprint for the genuine grassroots connections, how you know what that looks like, and also how you measure the capacity that the actual grassroots organisations have to be able to implement this legacy that you're talking about. So actually there's an infrastructural issue around where the investment comes from, the groups and the organisations on the ground that are supposed to be continuing the legacy of these pop-up events and how they have the ability to be the community connectors that you need them to be. So what happens in the year before the annual event? Does this organisation have the ability to have the partnerships or the networks? Where do the core costs come from in a situation where rising prices of buildings or people needing to cover the cost of their equipment or their electricity? All of this has to happen in tandem with the big event. So actually in terms of being we connected with this group and this is a legacy that we hope that they'll continue, can they? Yeah. Who's checking that?
Which is the difference between, I think, the Mellow when you have 30 years building them from one event, as you said, at the end of the year you'll be unemployed, because, well, hopefully not, but...
You got any jobs?
Anyone wants to hire a very high-skilled man? But yeah, so I guess it is a difference. It's not like you have a very short and then, but you still need to think about, well, this will finish, but we don't want to finish. You want to leave that legacy, and how you do that when that organization dissolves.
Yeah, and I think on that, we deliberately didn't want to own and deliver the projects ourselves because there was actually no long term in that. So it was about using the convening power of the event, if I call it that, to really influence, persuade, nudge, force others to commit to things. And that's we've challenged public bodies because we've had the support of right up to the cabinet and the First Minister over this event. It was a political decision to bring this event to Scotland. It was also at a time when Brexit was live, independence was live. Scotland is open for business, and I think it's about the power of sporting events to convene other agendas as well. So I think it's about that type of message. What I would say from a sports perspective, and again one of the things I said was that sport must be in a better place as a result of this event being in Scotland. It can't just all be about active travel or tourism with respect to other bodies in the room here. So there has been a real focus around how do we work with the governing body, Scottish Cycling? How do we build and build the capacity in Scottish Cycling? And how do they build the capacity of the club network? Because at the end of the day, that's where it can be sustained. And, we need more people in those clubs. And there has been, I won't share just yet because it's not public, but you'll see their turnover more than double in 12 months as a direct result of the Cycling World Championships coming to Scotland. For the first time, they're receiving direct money from Transport Scotland. There's massive injection of money, and that's all going back into grassroots and local clubs. That's from a sports perspective. We can't do absolutely everything, but that is an example.
I think from a smaller event point of view, we've had this discussion. I mean, I'm not going to be producer for ages. I'm not planning to. But we have a long-term vision in place, which we want to implement. And to sort of cater for that, we are planning to have like a mentoring scheme to bring in future producers who continue this legacy. And I mean, again, that slow build-up to be able to tap into bigger resources, get the networking happening. Because, I mean, longevity is key, and passing that sort of mantle on to the next person who then continues the work from where you left off is how we're sort of looking at it. Because, I mean, I don't know, 2-3 years or whatever I've got left in my position, it isn't enough to achieve that. So we've come up with a mentoring scheme to say that, okay, after us, it's still going to continue, because it's about the cause, it's not about us. It's about the overall cause, and that's what we're interested in. And that's where the focus is. And mindset, as discussed earlier, is very, very important for us as well, because if that vision is clear, then you can achieve it. Simple.
I would say that the contribution that festivals and events make to promoting equality, diversity, inclusion is that it creates a space where people can actually come into contact with difference, can experience other cultures, but it also gives this real visible action where people can actively be involved, where people can celebrate different cultures, but also realise that they invest in a community by making a tangible connection with each other, that being able to know your neighbours and formulate this cohesive community vision happens in tandem with actually access to space and spaces that you share together. So visibility is the importance for me when I'm programming, about who gets a platform to be able to share experiences, but also what does that then lead to? How does that then scaffold the creation of other events and other opportunities for people who usually wouldn't have access to these? And also, more than anything, about challenging racism, about creating a space which actively challenges and scaffolds a vision for a future where we don't have the hierarchies or the differences in discriminatory language, discrimination in terms of social, economic access, and actually has a political message. You can actually elevate a message by creating a space where people can go and have that conversation and have that dialogue. So that's the place of events and festivals.
So festivals have a massive contribution towards equality, diversity and inclusion. I'm the producer of the Glasgow Mela, and again working with the South Asian diaspora, and that strand of diversity, you're programming the event according to the nuances within that particular diaspora, and then how does that fit into the overall picture, the national picture, which in this case is Scotland. So through performance, and hopefully beyond performance, the Glasgow Mela will hopefully achieve a level of conversation which starts from grassroots, the low level, over to a more national level of conversation through networking and relevant conversations, with organisations, like-minded organisations, that we have access to. So yeah, a festival on many different levels can heavily contribute towards inclusion, diversity, acceptance. It's just a case of believing in the cause, having the right mindset to pursue the cause, and achieving a level of longevity to the overall sort of process of inclusion.
So the joy of events is that they're great catalysts. They have this chemistry that brings about change. They can be disruptors, whether that's at an organisational level, an individual level, at a community level. they encourage us to think and behave differently, whether we're organising them or attending them or performing at them. And in truth, it doesn't really matter whether it's a tiny community event or a great big global event. They all have that impact, and it's up to us, anyone involved in those events, to try and capture that energy, the chemistry, for the right ends. And if we choose that the thing we're really going to focus on is equality, inclusion and diversity, then I have no doubt that events can do that. And we've got great evidence to demonstrate that. But only if we have a real vision for it, and then we plan long term, we put a governance structure in place to achieve it with funding, and we ensure that it has enough political support and community support over the long run.
Mostly beyond the economic realm, in terms of obviously having economic contributions and injections to different communities of diverse backgrounds. I do think there's a very strong social and well-being aspect to it. So when we think about festival events, most times it could be around music, it could be around art, it could even be around business events and so forth. And this sort of tends to bring communities together so they could share their different cultural practices, and they do have a voice and they do feel a sense of belongingness, especially for communities that may have been or felt excluded from their basic cities. So that's my contribution in terms of how it could actually impact diverse communities in particular.
The biggest contribution that festivals and events can make to communities has got to be through improving the health and well-being of the people and organisations within those communities. And I think to co-design new events from the beginning by working with health and social care and other local organisations, not just the particular sport or cultural event or theme, but address health and well-being head on. And in that way you can set measurable objectives and who knows, hopefully access health budgets, which are going to go up at the expense of other budgets which are going to go down. And that's just as relevant to the corporate sector as to the private sector and the third sector. So be even more purposeful in your events, and it can make a real difference to society.
I think that festival events can have a huge impact in terms of EDI outcomes. I think particularly in terms of programming. They can showcase performers from very diverse backgrounds and cultures. They can showcase art forms that might not previously have been seen, and they can help to regenerate them. They can be very inclusive spaces, festivals, in terms of how they animate certain parts of the city, maybe where they go into parts of the city that haven't been used as a festival space before. And so they bring in that inclusivity. And then also, I think in terms of accessibility, you know, festivals need to work really hard to be as accessible as possible. And in terms of education, they can also be used as a platform to raise issues and challenges around EDI and how to deliver that through the festival space.